Iblis, known as Satan, holds the grim distinction of being the very first being to openly defy a direct command from Allah. Before humans had even taken their first breath, Iblis was already making his case. When Allah commanded all of creation to bow before Adam, Iblis refused. His reasoning was almost logical in its arrogance. He was made of fire, Adam was made of clay, and in his mind, fire is simply superior to clay. That argument did not go well for him. He was expelled from paradise immediately, stripped of his elevated status among the angels. But here is where it gets unusual. Iblis asked for something, and he got it. He requested a reprieve until the day of resurrection, time to prove that humans were not worth honoring, and Allah granted it. As recorded across multiple surahs, including Al-A'raf 7:11-18, Iblis vowed to mislead humanity from every direction. So the first challenger to Allah walked away not destroyed, but condemned to an eternity of failure, spending all of time trying to drag others down with him. The people of Nuh. Nuh, known as Noah, preached to his people for approximately 950 years, according to Surah Al-Ankabut 29:14. 950 years. That is not a typo. For nearly 10 centuries, he warned them, reasoned with them, begged them to abandon their idols and return to worship of Allah alone. They mocked him. They covered their ears. They wrapped themselves in their garments to avoid even hearing his words. When it became clear that not a single additional person would believe, Allah gave Nuh a different instruction: build a ship. The people mocked that too, watching a prophet construct a massive vessel far from any water. Then the water came. A flood described in Surah Nuh 71 as total and devastating swallowed everything. Every person who had spent generations rejecting the message drowned. The particularly brutal detail is that Nuh's own son refused to board, climbed a mountain thinking he could outlast it, and died in the water while his father watched. Only the small group of believers on the ark survived. The Ad were, by their own assessment, the strongest people who had ever lived. Surah Al-Ahqaf 46:21-25 records their boast directly. They genuinely believed no force in existence could touch them. They were massive builders, constructing towering structures across what is now the Arabian Peninsula, and their physical power was real enough that the boast was not entirely empty. Prophet Hud warned them to abandon their arrogance and idol worship. They told him he was foolish and dared anyone or anything to bring what he was threatening. Allah took them up on that. A wind was sent, not a storm, not a hurricane, but a sustained violent wind that screamed across their land for 7 nights and 8 days without stopping. Surah Al-Haqqa 69, 6-8 describes what was left. People thrown about like hollow palm trunks, an entire civilization of self-proclaimed invincibles reduced to nothing. Their ruins remained as a warning to anyone who came after, the Thamud. The Thamud came after the Ad and inherited the same land, carving their homes directly into the rock face of what is now Madain Salih in northwestern Saudi Arabia. Allah sent them Prophet Salih, and as a specific miracle and test, a she-camel that was not to be harmed. That was the condition. 1 camel left alone. According to Surah Al-A'raf 773-78 and Surah Hud 1164-68, the most wretched among them hamstrung the camel and killed it as an act of open defiance. Salih gave them a precise warning: 3 days. After 3 days, a single sound, described as as-sayha, a mighty blast, struck the civilization. Not a flood, not a wind, just one sound, and everyone who had participated in the defiance was destroyed where they stood. The precision of it is striking. 3 days' notice, 1 sound, total obliteration, Pharaoh. Pharaoh is the most extensively documented challenger in the entire Quran, appearing across 27 separate surahs. He did not merely reject Allah, he declared himself a god, stating openly in Surah An-Nazi'at 79:24, "I am your highest Lord." He enslaved the Israelites for generations, ordered the killing of newborn boys to prevent any prophesied challenger from emerging, and when Musa arrived performing 9 distinct miracles, Pharaoh watched each one and hardened further. The plagues, the staff, the parting of the sea, none of it moved him until the water was already closing over him. At that moment, Surah Yunus 1090-92 records that he declared faith, but it was not accepted. Faith under that particular pressure does not count. His body, according to the same surah, was preserved as a physical sign for future generations, a detail that has fascinated historians and archaeologists for centuries. The man who called himself the highest lord drowned in the water he chased his former slaves into. Karun. Karun was not a foreign enemy or an opposing king. He was from the people of Musa, one of their own, and he became one of the most spectacular examples of arrogance in the Quranic narrative. According to Surah Al-Qasas 2876-82, his wealth was so enormous that the keys to his treasuries alone were too heavy for a group of strong men to carry comfortably. When the people around him advised him to be grateful and give from what he had been given, Karun's answer was simple and total. This wealth is mine because of my own intelligence and my own skill. Allah had nothing to do with it. The crowd that had once envied his golden processions watched what happened next. The earth opened. Karun, his palace, and every treasure he had ever accumulated sank straight into the ground. No flood, no wind, no army, just the ground swallowing a man whole, because he looked at everything he had and saw only himself. Pharaoh's magicians. This entry works differently from every other one on this list, because it begins as a story of challengers and ends as a story of martyrs. Pharaoh assembled his most skilled magicians to publicly defeat Musa, to humiliate him in front of all of Egypt, and prove that his miracles were simply better tricks. The magicians were professionals. They threw down their staffs and ropes and produced a convincing illusion of serpents. Then Musa's staff moved. According to Surah Al-A'raf 7:120-126 and Surah Taha 20:70-73, the magicians fell to the ground in prostration before the performance was even over. They had spent their careers studying illusion, and they recognized immediately that what they had just witnessed was not one. Pharaoh was furious and threatened to crucify them and cut off their hands and feet on opposite sides as punishment. They told him to do whatever he wanted. The men who had arrived as Allah's opponents left as believers willing to die for that belief, and according to tradition, they did. Abu Lahab and his wife. Abu Lahab is one of the most personal challengers in this entire list. He was the Prophet Muhammad's own uncle, family, a man who should have been among the first to support the message. Instead, he was among its most vicious opponents. He publicly mocked the Prophet, threw garbage and stones at him, and worked actively to discredit him wherever possible. His wife was equally committed, reportedly gathering thorns and placing them on the paths the Prophet walked at night. Their opposition was so consistent and so personal that an entire surah of the Quran, Surah Al-Masad, chapter 111, was revealed specifically condemning them both by reference. 5 verses. 2 people. Total condemnation. Abu Lahab reportedly died of a disease shortly after the Battle of Badr in 624 CE, with some narrations describing a skin disease that caused his family to avoid his body. The surah that condemned him was revealed years before his death, making it one of the most specific prophetic condemnations in the text: the armies of the Confederates. In 627 CE, a coalition of Arab tribes and allied clans assembled an army of roughly 10,000 fighters and marched on the Muslim community in Medina, which at the time numbered around 3,000. By any conventional military calculation, the outcome should have been swift. The Muslims, on the advice of the Persian companion Salman al-Farisi, dug a trench around the exposed northern perimeter of the city, a tactic Arabia had never seen before. The coalition stalled. Days stretched into weeks. Surah Al-Ahzab 33:9-25 describes what broke them. Allah sent a bitter cold wind, and, according to the text, soldiers that the coalition could not see. Pots overturned, tents collapsed, coordination fell apart, and internal disputes fractured the alliance from within. After weeks of failed attempts to cross the trench, the entire army of 10,000 turned around and went home without achieving a single objective. Abraha and the army of the elephant. Around 570 CE, a Yemeni Abyssinian ruler named Abraha assembled a war campaign against Mecca with the explicit intention of destroying the Kaaba, the central sanctuary. He brought war elephants, an overwhelming psychological and physical weapon for the era, the kind of force that tended to end military conversations before they started. The Quraysh of Mecca, realizing they had no answer for elephants, largely evacuated. According to Islamic tradition, the lead elephant, named Mahmud, reportedly refused to advance toward the Kaaba and could not be made to move in that direction regardless of what its handlers did. Then, Surah Al-Fil, chapter 105, describes what came next. Flocks of birds arriving in waves, each carrying stones of baked clay, striking the army from above. The force that had marched to erase the most sacred site in Arabia was left, in the Quran's words, like eaten straw. Abraha retreated and died shortly after. The year became known permanently as the Year of the Elephant, and it is the same year, according to tradition, that the Prophet Muhammad was born, the hypocrites. The hypocrites represent the most unusual category on this list because their punishment is not spectacular. It is deferred, invisible, and according to the Quran, deeper than anything that came before it. Surah An-Nisa 4:145 places them at the lowest level of the fire, below the open disbelievers, below Pharaoh, below all the civilizations destroyed by flood and wind and sound. They operated within the Muslim community in Medina, publicly declaring faith while privately working to undermine military campaigns, spread rumors, and fracture morale. Their leader, Abdullah ibn Ubay ibn Salul, is referenced extensively in Islamic historical tradition as one of the most corrosive figures of the early period. Surah Al-Munafiqun, chapter 63, was revealed specifically about them. What makes their story distinct is that there was no dramatic worldly destruction, no earth opening, no birds, no flood. They lived, they died, and the Quran simply states that what waits for them is worse than everything that came before. Sometimes the absence of immediate consequence is the most chilling outcome of all. If you want to see more, click the video on screen now